Alright, so this week we're doing selection and repetition both in one sitting. So, no class on Tuesday, but you still have to do the work, right? 4th of July, you don't get a break. So, what I'm going to do is, let's just put both of them in the same file. So, Sublime. Okay, so if you've done C++, it's not going to be a lot, anything new, but it'll be a nice little review. So selection. I'll call this class select, repeat, save it, select, repeat, Java. Alright. And you still need to have your public static args. Zoom in a little more so you can see it better. Okay. You want lights are on or off? Off? I'll turn off. Alright. So I am going to be putting everything in the main and system out print line. Okay, and let's say you have an example of age is equal to 1, right? And you have a couple of messages, like you have one, you are under 18. Right, that's your first message, and then you're going to have another one. This one is you are over 18. Okay, I'll leave it at that. So my program, if I ran this, I have to go to desktop. Java C select repeat. Okay, if I run this thing, alright, it shows you both of the messages, but we only want to show the message that is relevant to the variable. Alright, so I want us to show that you are under 18 if this thing is 1. How do I do this? I use selection. Okay, and I do this using if age is less than 18. I'm going to do some curly brackets. Whatever's inside the curly brackets is only going to happen if this is true. This right here is your condition. Right? This is a condition, which means check to see if something is true or false. Okay? And then underneath this one, I'm going to say if my age is greater than 18, another message. Alright, save it. And I'm going to go in there, recompile my program, run it again, and now it shows you the relevant message. You're under 18. Okay? I'm going to change this to, let's say, 21. Save it, compile, run. Now you're over 18. Okay? Alright. So this is a condition, and the less than business, this here, is your relational operator. Okay? So we are using Boolean logic, right? Boolean is now another data type that you're learning about, and Boolean means it's either true or false. How does the computer know how to do this? It's part of the processor. The processor has an arithmetic logic unit. The arithmetic logic unit can compare different things to each other. It can tell you if one is less than, greater than, less, not equal, equal to each other. And I'll demonstrate this to you. So let's say I'm going to go in there. I'm going to do a system out print line, and I'll show you, let's say 3 is less than 4, plus 3 is less than 4. Okay, And let's run this thing. I'm going to take these out just for a second so we don't see them. So save this, compile, run, right? 3 is less than 4 shows you as true. Okay, maybe I should add a little space, is, right? Right, 3 less than 4 is true, right? And I can do all the other ones. So I can show you all the different relational operators. Okay, so let's do a 3 is less than or equal to 4. Right, less than or equal. I'm going to do another one. 3 is greater than 4. Okay, I'm going to do another one. 3 is greater than or equal to 4. I'm going to do another one. This one is 3 is equal to 4. Right, and last one is going to be 3 is not equal to 4. Okay, so this is less than, alright, in case you don't know your basic algebra, right, less than, this is less than or equal, this one is greater than, this one is greater than or equal, greater than or equal. Then you have equal. This is double equal, is equal. And the last one is not equal. Okay? And these here are my relational operators. Okay, with these relational operators is how I'm going to build my conditions. Okay, so all these, this is a condition, this is a condition, this is a condition. And again, how does the processor know how to do this? Well, it's built into it. The arithmetic logic unit does take care of that business for you. I'm going to compile this again, run it, and you can see that 3 is less than 4 is true, 3 is less than equal to 4 is true, right? It's not equal, but it's less than, so that's true. 3 is greater than 4 is false. 3 is greater than or equal to 4 is also 4 is false. 3 is equal to 4 is false. 3 is not equal to 4 is true. Okay? Basic relational operators. Okay, and with the relational operators is how we build our conditions. If a condition is true, right? If a condition is true, we execute whatever is in the curly brackets of an if. Okay, so those are the basics of selection, so that you can your program can go one way or another. So I'm going to turn off this piece of code. Actually, I'll leave it. Let's add some other ones. So this is, let's say I'm going to have another one. I'm going to change this thing to instead of 18, I'm going to do you are between I don't know, 18 and 21. Right, now I'm going for two different conditions. Right, so one of the conditions is greater than or equal. Let's include the 18. Right, and the other condition is going to be if my age is less than or equal to 21. Okay, and that's what I'm going to execute this one. Okay, so this is an example of a nested if. Right, so if this thing is true, then we're going to go inside it, and then if this is true, then we're going to go inside it. So if we're inside here, that means it must have been greater than or equal to 18 and less than or equal to 21, which means that you're between 18 and 21. I'm going to save this. I'm going to recompile my program, run it again, and there you go. You see that message. You're between 18 and 21. Okay, so that's an example of a nested if. This one, I can rewrite. So I'm going to rewrite the above nested if using an AND. Okay, and the AND is the two ampersands, just like the C++ type. So the way I'm going to do this, I'm going to say if my age is greater than or equal to 18, and my age is less than or equal to 21, right? If that's true, I'm going to show the same message that you saw right here. Okay? And let me try to get rid of these parentheses. See if Java is actually a little nicer than C++ when it comes to parentheses. Save it. Alright. Likes it. Yeah, there you go. So both of them do the same thing. One is a nested if, the other one is an AND, right? Using the logical operator AND. Okay? Any questions? Make sense? Okay. So what is this used for? Well, if you're checking to see if something is between a range of values, if it's within an acceptable range, that's a good candidate for an AND. Alright. So now let's do something else. I'm going to go in there and I'm going to mess with this thing some more. Alright. So this time I'm going to give it some kind of a bad age, right? Negative 21. So if it's a negative age, what I want to do is I'm going to say, all right, if my age is less than 0, I'm going to give them a system out print line that this is an invalid age. Okay, this is an invalid age. Okay, if I run this, compile first, right, you're going to see both of these. You're going to see this is an invalid age, and you're going to see you're under 18. Okay, because both of them are true, right? It's less than 0, it's less than 18. Okay, I don't want to see the you're under 18 if it's an invalid age. Okay, so I only want one of them to show up. How am I going to do this? Let me move this a little bit higher. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to change this thing here to an else if. I'm going to change this also to an else if. And I'm going to change this also to an else if. Okay, so how does an else if works? Okay, else if only gets checked when the previous if or else if was false. Right? So if this is true, we stop here. Okay? If this is true, we stop here. Right? Not going to check the rest of the else ifs. Okay? Let's see if it works. Save it. Compile. Run. Alright, there you go. That's an invalid age. Alright. So, let's go and mess with it some more. I'm going to give it some really huge age. Right? Like that. Let's say that's also an invalid age. So let's say we're going to assume that if my age is bigger than 123, right, we're going to go with another one of these, invalid age. Oops. And I'm also going to make this an else if, right? Why am I doing that? Because if the first thing is true, I don't need to go and look at if it's a bigger than 123. It's already bad age, so stop there. Okay? So, for a really big age, I should get this message, and none of these other ones should show up. So basically, it will check the first one, that's false. Check the second one, this is true. And if this is true, it stops here, right? So if this is true, stops here, right? Do not check the rest of the ifs and else ifs. Okay, see if it works. I'm going to save it, compile it, run it, and again, it's an invalid age. All right, so, but there's one problem here. I wrote the same line of code 2 times, or same system out print line 2 times. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to simplify these 2 lines. All right, these 2 lines, I'm going to replace them. Replace the above if, else if, using the logical operator OR. And OR is just two vertical lines, just like C++. Okay? And it goes like this. If my age is less than 0, or my age is bigger than 123, that is when I'm going to give you that message. Alright? So let's go back. Let's give it the negative age. Negative. Save it. Compile. Run. It's an invalid age. Go in there. Change it to a really big age. Save it. Compile it. Run it. And it's also an invalid age. Okay? So this is an example of an OR. And you also had an example of an AND. The way the truth table for these is, you can either have a true here. Well, if you have a true here and a true here for the AND, this whole thing is going to turn out to be true. Okay, there's other ways this can be. You could have a true and a false, in which case this thing is going to be false. You can have a false and a true, in which case this is going to be a false. And you could also have a false and a false, in which case this whole thing is going to be false. So the only time an AND turns out to be true is when both of the conditions are true. Okay? If either of them is false, it's not going to be true. Okay? That's how it works. Now I'm going to grab this truth table and I'm going to go in there. Let's have a look at it, how the OR works. You can have a true. You can have a true, right? Let's go with two truths. In which case this whole thing is going to be a true. Okay? And you can also have a false and a true, in which case this is going to be a true. And you can also have a true here and a false there, in which case this whole thing is going to be a true. And you can also have a false and a false, and that's the only time this whole thing is going to be a false. Alright, so the only time this turns out to be a false is if both of your conditions are false. Alright, what do we use this for? We use it, alright, useful to check if a value is outside of an acceptable range. Alright, this one here is useful to see if a value is within an acceptable range. Any questions? Make sense? Alright, so these are your basic ifs and else ifs, right? Let me do one more example. So let's say you have an age, I'm changing the age now, is equal to, I don't know, 100. Well, let's do it 101. Okay? And under it, I'm going to have an if age is less than 100. I'm going to give you a system out print line. Alright? And by the way, if you have a single statement with it underneath an if, you don't even need the curly brackets. Right? So I could have simplified this thing here like that. And it would have worked just the same, because there's only one thing inside of this, and that is this if, and there's only one thing inside of this, and that is this system out print line. But let's leave it the way it was. Whoops. Alright, so I'm going to add a little note. If there is a single statement underneath an if, you do not need the curly brackets. It just cleans up your code a little. Okay, so that's going to be the first one. So if the age is less than 100, I'm going to give you you are under 100. And then I'm going to do another one. And this time I'm going to introduce something you haven't seen yet, and that's an else. And in that case, I'm going to say you are over 100, or you are over 100 or 100, right? So the way the else works is the else automatically happens when the preceding if or else if is false, right? So if this thing is false, we're automatically going to execute whatever's inside the else. Okay, if you have multiple things, you got to throw in some curly brackets, right? So let's say I have system out print you are over, and then system that out that print ln, right? So what's going to happen if I don't put my curly brackets is it will think that this is the only thing that's inside the if. So it will basically try to do this kind of stuff. Curly brackets around this thing. Okay? If you don't want to do that, put the curly brackets the way they're supposed to go. Right? And there it is. Okay? Any questions? Those are your ifs and the else ifs. So that's it. That's all there is. So you have your relational operators: less than or equal, greater than or equal, not equal. You have your logical operators, which are the or and the and. You have ifs and else ifs, right? It stops at the first one that is true if you have an if else if chain. And you also have an else. The else automatically happens when the preceding if or else if is false. Okay? So that's pretty much all there is as far as selection. Let's have a look at what the book has to say about that. Alright, so this is your summary for the selection from the book. Oh wow, look at that. Well, that's my lecture. Pretty much the same thing. No, this one right here. Alright, relational operators, this whole thing that I showed you, the ands, the ors, the if, else, ifs, the nested ifs that I showed you, the if, else chain, that it stops at the first one that's true. There's also a switch, right? So the switch is pretty much, I'm not a big fan of the switch, to be honest with you. Some languages just got rid of the switch, they don't even have a switch. So it's basically like having an if, else chain, but that is a little bit more limited. So this is an example of, let's say, see how here you have an if age is equal to 10, and then else if age is equal to 11, and then else if age is equal to 12. Right? You can have a whole bunch of these, and you can rewrite this thing by just saying switch. What are we going to be switching? We're going to be switching for age, case 10. That is just this one. Same thing as doing this. Right? And then at the end you have to tell it to break, so it stops at that particular switch. So this is for case 10, you're going to do this, then you're going to break. If you don't have a break, you'll automatically continue for all the other cases. Okay? This is the case 11, which is just like this one right here. Okay, and that's why some languages got rid of this thing, because you could write it using an if, else if. Why would you bother using a switch? Okay, so I'm not very big on the switch. And the default right here, that is basically like if you had an if, else if, else if, else if, and then the final thing is the else. Alright, so the last thing that happens when none of the other things happen is the default for a switch. Okay? So that's that. And that's pretty much all there is as far as that chapter is concerned.